I would like to give the floor now to Mike Lurling to present us his talk about his talk related from a biomanipulation to buffer strips. Mike, the floor is yours.
So I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we do.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot for inviting me to present today. And it was really a pleasure to listen to the previous speakers who really paved the road to my presentation or a contribution from the Netherlands. The title is From Biomanipulation to Buffer Strips, the Dutch approach. Let's see if it works here. Yes, having an issue. Oh, there we are. There was quite some delay. Well, biomanipulation. Well, it has been introduced by Lawrence already. Was coined by Joseph Shapiro already 50 years ago, and well meant for all those approaches in which ecosystem components were manipulated to reduce nuisance antibacterial plumes. So you can think about introducing filter feeding mussels or improved conditions for filter feeding zooplankton, planting macrophytes. But in general, it's being used for those activities in which fish is being removed, mostly sedimentary fish or cyprinids, as we've heard in Tom's presentation, or the introduction of fish eating fish, a picture that we also saw from Loch Leven, if I'm correct. It became quite popular in the Netherlands in the late 80s, and that had everything to do with the situation of the Dutch lakes. Dutch lakes are mostly shallow lakes, and despite external nutrient load reductions, they didn't clear up. So additional measures were needed. And in those shallow lakes, we usually can see two states: a turbid state with a lot of phytoplankton, cyanobacteria, or a clear water state with quite some submerged macrophytes flourishing there. The nutrient loading, the reduction, was not sufficient enough to bring the lake back from the turbid to clear state. So additional measures were considered, and one of those was biomanipulation to reduce sedimentary suspension by fish and improve underwater life climate to support vegetation. Already 30 years ago, this diagram was presented, the important role of fish, depicted fish suspending sediment, feeding on zooplankton, and by doing so, helping the lake to maintain a turbid condition. One of the arrows, and an important arrow in this feedback scheme, is missing. That's the one between sediment and nutrients. I'll come back to that. So biomanipulation was embraced by the Dutch because external loads, nutrient load reductions, appeared insufficient to bring our lakes in a more desired state as they were before the 1950s. And before the 1950s, virtually all Dutch shallow lakes were crystal clear with abundant submerged macrophytes. However, biomanipulation also turned out not to be the magic solution. It was not a silver bullet. And in an overview of Dutch biomanipulation projects published 20 years ago by Ramesh Gurnati and Tom, they concluded that the efficiency is questionable, and there are probably more examples of failures than of success. And one of the reasons of the failures was the insufficient or no decrease of internally stored nutrients, in this case they mentioned phosphorus. Similar kind of conclusions was derived by comparing Dutch and Danish lakes that had been biomanipulated. There are not that many long-term successes unless you would repeatedly remove fish in certain lakes. And this is actually an example that we also saw in Tom's presentation before. lake festival. Well, the situation in the Dutch lakes has not improved, despite all our attempts to improve water quality. If you just have a look at the ecological status of the Dutch surface waters nowadays, well, actually, this is the second river-based management plan, so it's period until 2021. There's not a single water body that has a green appearance, so meeting the good ecological states or good ecological potential. And yeah, I have to say that water quality, and I agree with these newspaper items, that water quality in the Netherlands is the worst or the poorest in Europe, the European Union. And it doesn't look well for the third river-based management plan period either. So we need to do stuff. Well, we need to implement measures reducing the nutrient loads. One of the main issues or legacies from the past and diffuse nutrient pollution. That's a real issue. In the Netherlands, our agricultural industry got derogation, so they were allowed to add a little bit more manure on the field than was allowed from Brussels under certain assumptions. And to have the derogation granted, they need to meet certain requirements. So certain activities need to be implemented to reduce the leaching of nutrients from agricultural fields. The reason for the emphasis on agriculture is that in the Netherlands, nitrogen and phosphorus load from agriculture is the main contributor to the overall nutrient loads to surface waters. So that's the contribution from agriculture is given in blue in these diagrams for nitrogen and for phosphorus load, and the unit is a million kilograms of each element per year. The light purple one, that's from wastewater treatment plants, also considerable, but is undergoing a continuous improvement. And at this moment, 86 and 87% of nitrogen and phosphorus is being retained in wastewater treatment plants in the Netherlands, and 99.7% of the Dutch households is connected to the sewage system and wastewater treatment. So we're doing okay there. In 2022, the European Commission recommended that the Netherlands should put more emphasis on reducing nitrate pollution, tackle eutrophication, and also help farmers with more sustainable and less intense production. They said that the Netherlands should implement buffer strips to agricultural fields. Maybe you saw this yellowish field. The first slide I showed. There was a tiny green strip next to it. That's a buffer strip. And the yellow field, that's because of glyphosate spraying, which is quite common throughout the country. Well, the buffer strips that need to be implemented should be 5 meters in width when the nearby water is ecologically vulnerable, 3 meters in width when it's another water type, a ditch or whatever, and 1 meter when these ditches dry up in summer. You can find all kind of ways to calculate where to start your buffer strip and how wide it should be, etc., etc. And the aim is to reduce the diffuse loading and the runoff from agricultural fields. I think about 15 years ago, maybe 17 years ago, my colleagues here at Wageningen University, they studied the efficiency of buffer strips, so the BSE, that's buffer strip efficiency. And they concluded that there was hardly any efficiency in retaining nutrients from a 5 meter wide buffer strip. So we have to see how effective this will be and if they will be implemented, although it has to, but there's a lot of resistance from Dutch farmers at this moment, simply because it will take away some of their land. They cannot grow any crops on it, they cannot put manure on it. So there are some economic consequences for our farmers as well that have to be solved. what we can conclude from all these attempts is that there is not such thing as a magic pill, and not a single nature-based solution will be that effective to bring our water bodies from a turbid, cyanobacteria-infested state back to clear water state with abundant submerged aquifers. So our new approach, and actually it's an old approach, but we had forgotten about it, that it's to start always with what we call the proper diagnosis, system analysis. So if we have a water body, it doesn't matter which one, we start to look at where do water and nutrients come from. What is the makeup of our system? Do we have hundreds or maybe over 1,000 kilogram sedimentary suspending fishes or bream and carp? Well, you know one thing, you will never get clear water unless you reduce the fish stock. And what we also include is, what is the water being used for? Is it for drinking water, irrigation, recreation, maybe all activities that you can imagine, amenity, etc., etc. And in the cost-benefit analysis, try to include benefits that may stretch further than just people that are directly using a lake. And greenhouse gas emissions were already mentioned by Lawrence, for instance, that can also be included there. Altogether, it's a diagnosis, and the diagnosis will lead to measures. And measures is plural, because we are convinced that in most cases we need to do more than one thing to restore our lakes. Now we'll give an example of these. And this is Lake Grote Banana. It's in the southwestern part of the Netherlands. It's a relatively small lake and shallow one. It had quite some sediment on a peat layer. The lake was dug in the 18th century because of peat harvesting. And over time, it became quite turbid. There were no macrophytes in there, frequent cyanobacterial blooms, as you can also see from the picture here. Two tiny streams feeding into the lake, bringing in nutrients. And fish stock was not that extremely high, as 270 kilograms per hectare. Can easily be more, can be 5 times more in these kind of lakes in the Netherlands. But the majority was constant carp. And the Water Authority wanted to reduce or get rid of cyanobacterial blooms, create clear water with submerged macrophytes, bring nutrients down, and increase water depth. The result of the system analysis is given here. These are the phosphorus fluxes. The bottom, the grey dashed bar here, that's what comes in from what came in from the tiny streams. The black bar was annually recycled from sediments, and we have some other sources, some runoff from swamps, leaflets, birds, etc., etc. The model PC Lake was used to determine what we call critical loads. So the upper red bar line here indicates the nutrient load at which the lake would switch from a clear state to a turbid state. The bottom one where it would go back from turbid to clear. Preferably you would want to be as low as possible, and for this lake it was decided to tackle both the external and internal load. The whole set of measures was implemented, starting with removing the fish. Fish was removed because the next action was dredging the lake, get rid of this thick layer of sediment that was laying on the beach. And reconstruction of the banks. A large part of the lake was hard walls, so the banks were reshaped, softened, gradual slopes, and spots were constructed for anglers as well. The two streams were diverted, no longer feeding into the lake, but going along the lake, then to the sea. Sand capping was implemented, and in the sand, an active barrier was included, which is a lantern-modified clay to immobilize phosphates that could seep leach out of the peat underlying peat layer. So the sand was deposited on the peat layer. An additional intervention measure was implemented to reduce the phosphates that were still present in the water column, and with the help of school kids, helophytes and macrophytes were planted in May 2016. and some additional fish removals took place because of illegal stockings that happened, despite agreements with the local angling society. But not all fishermen and members are members of the society, and not all are happy with the removal of especially carp. The results are, well, I will not give all results, but just depict here the nutrient concentrations. Our total phosphorus concentrations showed nice annual cycles before intervention, which is reflecting the internal release of phosphorus, and it declined and to low concentration and remained low after intervention. And also total nitrogen concentrations reduced and remained low. After the intervention, cyanobacterial blooms no longer happened. So everybody was quite happy with that. Submerged plants and emergent plants increased over time, and the fish community is gradually going to a more desired composition without huge amounts of carp and bream. So if we then relate the mean summer growth lake concentrations and total phosphorus concentrations to the Water Framework Directive standards, red indicates the bad status, orange is insufficient, yellow is moderate, and green is a good ecological potential. Or before the lake was in a bad status, and it moved gradually to moderate to good. So this is an example where combined measures were powerful to meet water framework targets, and with planting macrophytes and a diverse variety of macrophytes. Also, the water framework scores for macrophytes met and are meeting the good ecological potential of the lake. And surprisingly to us, also charophytes popped up that were not introduced in the lake. So to summarize this, we have to realize that each lake is unique, and that you should always start with a proper diagnosis, so with a system analysis. And Tom mentioned that it is difficult to decipher which measure is most effective. In the Netherlands, we are not so worried about that anymore. We just want to treat and save our lake patients. And by doing so, we implement whatever our analysis thinks should be wise to do. Catchment measures, if possible, trying to implement measures that reduce leaching from agriculture, internal load control, manipulation in the ecosystem itself by removing fish, by planting macrophytes, etc., whatever is needed to bring the lake to the desired condition. These interventions, however, come with a cost. The total cost of this restoration project were €2 million, of which 25%, so €500,000 for research, for project management, and also for monitoring. The monitoring is also crucial to have an idea about the efficiency of the lake and its continuing, because the lake is also not isolated. Birds are still coming there, nutrients are still coming in. So in a while, water authorities will implement a small-scale intervention to reduce nutrients. It's not necessary at the moment, but the water is still clear, and how it is now, this lake is also able to absorb climate extremes, as we have seen, especially in the summer 2018 and 2020, dry, warm summers, but also very heavy summer storms and a real big flush of water coming in. So it's able to absorb it, so it has become more resilient against climate extremes as well. And I will leave it by this. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mike. I would like to give the floor to Brian to inform us whether there are any questions for you or the other presenters.
Hi, Constantina. There's been quite a few questions, and I think most of them are getting answered or are being answered, but I think one of the high-level questions that came through was about cost effectiveness and about how acceptable nature-based solutions are when they're being scaled up. So maybe a question for Mike, if I could frame that in the context of your presentation, at the scale of the Netherlands and with the scale of the problem that you're facing. What's the sort of economic argument that lies behind inaction versus action? I know this is quite a topical issue at the moment on the ground in the Netherlands, but you know, how does money drive this question in terms of implementing nature-based solutions to restore lakes in the Netherlands?
Yeah, well, it's an ongoing discussion, of course, and we have to realize that the Netherlands is a pretty rich country. So this intervention in this 4.8 hectare lake was 2 million euros. About scaling up an urban lake, 114 hectare lake in the city of Rotterdam, also has been restored. And the cost of that intervention was 15 million euros. So we talk about really a lot of money. The lake in Rotterdam, Kralingse, it has 3 million visitors per year. And there are a lot of activities going on. So for the municipality, the water authority and the province, it was a no-brainer to put really millions in there. And because of all the activities around it and the use of the lake, for them it was, well, they have to. They said, well, we have to, regardless of what it costs. It's so important for the well-being of our citizens. And it also brings in money because of all the activities. And activities range from boating races to people that just go for a swim. There are restaurants out there. They have festivals on the shores of the lake. So a lot of things are going on there. And but we realize that it will be very difficult to treat all waters in the Netherlands as this. So choices have to be made.
Yeah.
But still, these are mostly in-lake measures. What we do, the diversion of a stream, it doesn't do anything about the diffuse load.
Yeah.
Maintaining this huge agriculture industry, for instance, will keep on fueling nutrient spillage into the environment. To give you some figures about that, annually from the agricultural practices, more than 300 million kilograms of nitrogen being lost to the environment, and more than 2/3 leaches out of the rooting zone in the field, so it goes to the groundwater and to the surface water as nitrate. And as Will nicely explained in his presentation, for phosphorus, we are still talking about a few million kilograms per year. And so the tap is still running. So what we are doing is mopping while the faucet is still running. And as long as the politicians have not decided what to do, I think, we're stuck with that.
Yeah. Thank you.